Right, as promised before that story, which actually ended up being an interesting one. Here it was, me thinking it was some rap battle off. It was a legal stoush. There you go. I'm joined now by Liberal Democrats Senator David Leyonhjelm. Thanks for your company.
Thank you.
Budget's coming up. We've now got the Treasurer seemingly saying that he can't necessarily guarantee a surplus by 2021, or before then certainly. Your thoughts on that?
No great surprise. They really won't bite the bullet on spending. Middle-class welfare in particular, they squealed and yelled and carried on, had to be blackmailed before they cut off childcare for people earning more than $350,000. There's just no appetite there for winding back spending where it really matters. And their experience in the Senate in the 2014...
On that, I mean, I know that this isn't all spending cuts, but we see the reports in the Australian today in relation to welfare hit to target cheats. We see the fees going up for higher education for students as a policy that has also been earmarked, I think, in the Weekend Australian as the splash. So they're doing things, whether you agree with them or not, but then all of a sudden they're not touching middle-class welfare.
Correct. Yeah, so...
Is that a vote thing?
Yeah, well, they're going for the safe areas, so there's no votes to be lost chasing welfare cheats. Not even Labor will protest about that, or probably not even the Greens, if truth is told.
I wouldn't go that far, but
no,
you never know.
You never know. Yeah, that's right. Higher education. I mean, they had the battle in 2014 about making students pay more. Well, actually, borrow more, really, because it's all funded by HECS. And Simon Birmingham's never disguised the fact that he'd like to do something about that, winding back the very wealthy status of most of the universities. I'm hoping that he'll get somewhere this time, but this is a battle still to be had. I'd also like to see him carry on a bit further with this idea of making the universities a bit more accountable for the employability of their students, you know, to link their Commonwealth funding somehow to educational outcomes and employment outcomes, yes.
Can I ask a question on that, to play devil's advocate? Is university all about making people job ready, or is it also about the education of higher education?
Yes, education for its own sake has some merit, and I'm not discounting that. But the question is who pays for it. That's really what it amounts to. You know, should people who don't have a degree, who are out there working and earning taxes, pay for people being educated for education's sake? If they're not benefiting the economy overall, they probably should pay for it themselves. You know, you can borrow the money if you want to. There's no hardship there. But
would you like to see HECS be higher than 40% as a contribution?
Yes, and I also would like to see HECS tightened up a bit. You know.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, repayment schedule is very generous. There was a proposal to make the interest rate on HECS the same as what the rate at which the government borrows money.
But you can't do that, can you? Because then people have got this deferred bill which is going up faster than CPI.
No, if the government is borrowing money at normal bond rates, normal Commonwealth bond rates, they're pretty close to CPI.
But it's usually a little bit above.
Oh yeah, but really we're not talking about breaking the bank here. And in any case, you know, if you don't recover the money at the rate at which it costs the government money, you're essentially subsidising it. So
but don't you think the idea that, which I believe they have done, haven't they, which is that there's no reduction for upfront payment, that's got to be a disincentive for people to bother to pay upfront? That
was a mistake, you know. When I went through university the last time, there was a discount for upfront payment. I think that should be returned as an incentive for people who can
afford to. They'll take the hit rather than let it accrue, and therefore the government doesn't get its hands on it.
Yes, that's right, I agree. The other thing that I think could be looked at is why is HECS available to students irrespective of their means? Absolutely no consideration given to, you know, whether they really need...
Who would you test though, the parents?
Well, yes, that's a debate worth having. Parents, household income, the student's income. You know, you can get a mature age student, for example, who's got a healthy income, who is still eligible for a HECS subsidy funded by people who aren't going to university, will never go to university.
But often those mature age students are people that, for whatever reason, often through social disadvantage, might not have had a chance to study when they were younger. So you wouldn't want to then give them a disincentive to, if I can put it this way, better themselves when they're older, when they try to go back to university, would you?
No, well, it's access to university obviously shouldn't be a disincentive at all. It's really only a question of who pays what is now the 60% of the cost of the university fees. and whether they should pay a higher proportion of that, irrespective of their means.
So you're a vet by training. So in a lot of those more vocationally orientated degrees, whether it's medicine, law to a lesser extent, but certainly engineering, veterinary sciences, and so forth, dentistry. There's no need generally for more people to be studying than there are positions in the workforce. But that attitude has shifted in a lot of other areas. So, for example, education. There's a lot more people studying education than there are teaching positions. There are a lot more people studying things like journalism, communications, than there are positions. Are too many people getting degrees when we are, in a sense, sending a message through this drive to put more people into university that there is something wrong with, for example, getting a trade where we have shortages, where we have things like 457 provisions, which are going to be retained under the new ones, to bring people in because there aren't enough Australians with those qualifications? Yes,
that's a valid point. There is a bit of a culture that if you haven't got a degree, you can't be successful. And that's obviously not true. There are lots and lots of very successful people who've never got a degree, never want one, never needed one. So yes, we need to sort of change the thinking that only a degree will get you success. So when the kids are coming through school, they need to understand there's other ways to be successful. But I also think...
so too many people are getting degrees?
Well, yeah, but it's a market... It should be a market-driven thing. So I don't want to stop people from getting a degree irrespective.
But it can't ever be a market-driven thing, Senator, can it, when you've got HECS? Because by definition, that distorts the market.
Depends how much. I don't mind the loan scheme. I don't mind the fact that if you come from a poor family, you can still afford to go to university, you can still break out of...
Yeah, I agree with all
of that sort of stuff.
But look, let me be very clear. I'm a huge fan of HECS because you can't have upfront fees because it obviously makes it a social disadvantage issue. But it is a distorted market, isn't it? If it's not upfront, whilst we hear that some people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds might be disinclined to go to university with higher HECS just because attitudinally it could be a problem, it's still the case that if you're not paying for it up front, you're more likely to not be as adroit to the idea that this isn't worth it. And what about the responsibility of the universities, rather than just trying to bump up the number of people in some degrees for financial advantage, say, you know what, education at the moment, there aren't enough teaching positions.
This gets back to the incentives. I don't think there's any incentive realistically for the universities to think about, well, what are the students going to do with their degrees when they get out at the other end? Should they let them in the first place? Are they creating unrealistic expectations of what they will achieve as a result of getting their degree? There's just so many youngsters who go in with these starry eyes about doing environmental studies, for example. They think they're going to save the world, and they end up just becoming waiters and waitresses. That's all they're good for. There's no jobs. The organisations that they think are wonderful and going to support them, Greenpeace and WWF and so forth, they'll have them as interns and not pay them anything, but that's where it ends. They hardly any full-time permanent jobs. And permanency, that's another matter. So, yeah, I think there is unrealistic expectations about what a university degree will do, and there should be a greater acceptance of the fact that other forms of qualifications. I like post-secondary qualifications in general, but I don't think we should be too fussy about what kind they are. And a lot of people get stuck into their head this idea that you've got to make a life determining choice just as you're finishing up in high school.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, at the age of often 17, not even 18 yet, in many cases.
I don't know what you want to do.
What about the US system? I mean, Melbourne University and the University of Western Australia, disclosure, I have an affiliation there, have moved to that US model where you have more broad-based undergraduate degrees and then you do graduate study in areas like you have or in areas like law or whatever else it might be. Broad-based arts or broad-based science before that. Do you like that?
Yes.
It delays the decision-making until you're more like a 21-year-old instead of an 18.
Adult, yes. Has consequences for your earning capacity, if that's important to you. But yes, I like that idea. I also like the idea of being very, very open to mature age students. So, people do some sort of qualification, go and get a job, get into the workforce, and then think, God, I hate this. I really have to go and do something I really want to do.
Hang on a minute, a moment ago, Senator, you were telling me that mature age students could be looked at to pay more because they've got more earning capacity.
We're talking about getting in, not about who pays for it. If they can pay for it, they should pay for it. I did 3 degrees, and I got subsidised by the taxpayers on all 3 occasions. It was ridiculous. The only time I needed subsidy was the first one. After that, I was working. I was doing them part-time. And it was totally unnecessary. But, you know, the idea, well, I'm not going to take the subsidy. First of all, you couldn't even reject it. But even if I did, that old joke about peeing in a wetsuit, you know, you feel all warm and fuzzy, but nobody notices, it would still apply.
That is a perfect moment for a segue into something else. Not that that is the segue, Senator. Let's talk about Cory Bernardi's new party, the Australian Conservatives. They've merged with Family First on the weekend. Well, just yesterday I spoke to him with Paul Kelly from the Australian newspaper, my colleague here for Sunday Agenda, and we quizzed him on a whole series of policies just to try to see where the Australian Conservatives sat. I don't know if you had the chance to watch all of that, but how different are the policy settings and the values, as you can see it, of the Australian Conservatives to a party like your own, the Liberal Democrats?
Yeah, I did watch that. That was really very good to hear him spell out his views. I like Cory. You know, at a personal level, we get on very well. We work well together in the Senate. He's a decent guy, a nice guy and a decent guy. And,
do you agree on more than you disagree on?
Yes, I think we probably do. On economic things, he's a small government, low tax, balanced budget person. That's good. We call that liberalism, small L liberalism.
I don't think he does, though.
No, I don't think he does. No, I agree. He likes to use the word conservatism. The problem with the word conservative is it basically it's not a value-based view. It's a defence of the status quo with a willingness to listen to argument about changing it and a belief in the institutions. Edmund Burke is argued to be said to be the father of conservatism, although...
Well, he'd be rolling in his grave with some of what constitutes modern conservatism.
Absolutely right. And, you know, if you use the word properly, in the Soviet Union, or in Russia, before the Soviet Union was abandoned or collapsed, you know, in its death throes, those people who were resisting the collapse of the Soviet Union were called conservatives. In China, before they adopted a market economy, those Communist Party members who were saying, no, we don't want to adopt a market economy, they were called conservatives because they were arguing for the status quo.
On what issues do Cory Bernardi and you've talked about some of what you agree on, what are the big ones that you disagree on based on what you heard? Yep. I don't mean in value senses, but you heard the interview, on some of what he spelt out yesterday.
Social issues. He thinks the government should stay out of your pocket, and I agree. That's a good thing, but he doesn't think the government should stay out of your private life, and I do. So same-sex marriage, so you don't have to be in favour of it, recommend it, endorse it, you just have to say it's not the government's business. That's a libertarian view. That's my view.
Guns? I noticed that on guns he didn't sound like he was anywhere near your view on that.
No, he's pretty typical of One Nation and the National Party on that. He says the status quo is basically okay, let's leave the status quo alone. I don't think the status quo is acceptable. Now, that's not a particularly conservative point of view. 20 years ago, the conservative point of view would be leave it alone, and then John Howard upset the status quo.
But how much change would you make to it? I mean, for example, in the US, you can carry a handgun. Do you think people should be allowed to carry a handgun?
Not most people. Not most people.
But some people?
Some people, sure. Australia's one of the few countries in the world where it wouldn't matter if somebody had said, I'm going to come and kill you, Peter van Onselen. I know where you live. I have tried to break into your house before. I have threatened other people. I'm armed. I'm coming after you. And you know all about that. Very few countries in the world would say you cannot have a weapon, let alone a gun, to defend yourself. Australia is really rare in that, in having that position.
But that is an isolated example. I'm talking about, are you saying that you think ordinary citizens should, not all, I recognise you'll find a way to limit it, but that it should be possible for an ordinary citizen to get a gun licence to carry a sidearm?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. There are a few countries where you can do that. I'm talking about concealed, so the bad guys don't know which people are armed. But, you know, ex-police officers who are properly trained in guns, ex-military properly trained in guns, people who've been in pistol clubs like I have for decades. I can handle a pistol better than most police because I use them.
Yeah.
I use them a lot more often than
But
they
you
do.
honestly think you should be allowed to then have a concealed...
Sure, in the Czech Republic, they do that. Their murder rate is no higher than Australia's. America does have a much higher murder rate than Australia's, but America is very unusual for having such a high murder rate. Even their murder rate without guns is higher than ours. It's not just guns that they kill people with. They kill people with they kill each other with a lot of other things.
I don't know anything about the Czech Republic. I think that's a general statement. But on this specific issue, so you're saying that they've got the right for people to carry, some people, with the right licensing, to carry a concealed sidearm or firearm,
pistol,
but their murder rate's no higher than ours.
No, that's right.
Shootings generally, same thing?
No, they're a very safe country. Okay. They're similar to us and New Zealand. New Zealand doesn't. Well, New Zealand, I don't know their law. Canada, I don't know New Zealand's law on carrying a pistol. I think you can still get a permit if you've got a real and present danger. Most countries will allow that. Switzerland, for example, they've got heaps of guns. I mean, shooting is probably more popular than golf is here. It's a huge sport. You see rifle ranges in all these little villages all over the place, and yet they have their murder rates no higher than ours. They're a very safe country, and if you are threatened, you can get a permit to carry a gun. I'm not suggesting most people could carry a gun. You know, if you're not familiar with them, if you're not trained,
but it should be possible.
Yeah, it should be possible.
We're out of time. We'll talk to you, I'm guessing, in the wake of the budget, David Leyonhjelm. Get your thoughts on what we ultimately see unveiled. Appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you.